Hello, everyone. My name is Sunny. I go by she, her pronouns, and I am Sunny T's Kitchen, and I also collaborate with Beloved Community Incubate. I have been a vendor since July of 2022. So it's been a year. Yep. It's been a year this year, July 2023, and I love the experience. I've been right outside of the Target located in Columbia Heights, 3100 14th Street, and it's been an amazing experience. Like I've met so many people, different crowds, different cultures. I love it. I love the atmosphere.
My name is Kasai Gabrabrahan. I am a street vendor for almost 29 years. Since the COVID, I stopped my business, and I'm meeting with Jeff and Megan, and they help us because they told us this payment, the tax payment, if they don't pay this amount, pay tax, we don't renew your license, they told me. Then I come to Jeff to help us because I cannot afford to pay the tax amount. That's why I come, and they help us until now.
When I got involved, it was very much a mutual aid response at the start of the pandemic. So I was involved with a lot of money raising, biking around different cash cards to people, making sure that people could eat and have enough income to continue to survive without working, and really, really trying to make that visible to the DC government in ways that became the Excluded Worker Campaign, because street vendors were some of the informal economy workers who were not eligible for unemployment compensation and were not receiving stimulus checks from the federal government. So I got to know many street vendors, primarily in Columbia Heights and Mount Pleasant at the start, and just spoke with people and allowed myself to be moved by people's stories and hearing where people were at, and 100% echo what Felix was sharing. The main things that I heard from people were fear of the police and wanting to be able to control land, talking about how street vendors are like very hard workers and are engaged in dignified work and just want to be out on the street, able to produce for themselves and for their families. And I saw the cops were harassing people, assaulting people, basically stepping into street vendors' workplaces and not allowing them to work to survive. So the initial fight was definitely getting the cops out of street vendors' workplaces, and we had immense success in that way. And I think Sunny and a lot of other vendors throughout the pandemic heard about the vending area in Columbia Heights, and basically heard about the sort of safe space that vendors in Columbia Heights and Mount Pleasant had created by banding together to get the cops out and to get DCRA and the regulatory officials out when they were there just to punish and not to support vendors to actually be able to comply with laws and regulations. And that attracted tons of vendors throughout the pandemic. So in hearing people's stories, also started to notice what Felix was saying, like the regulatory system for street vendors is part of a whole carceral network where the police are just the most visible piece of it. And what Kasai was sharing, we heard tons of different stories. So Kasai and a lot of vendors who used to be licensed before the pandemic and were licensed when the pandemic started continued to be charged a minimum quarterly sales tax that they had to pay every single quarter.
For me, what was not clear at first, because again, this was my first time ever dealing with campaigning, it was the politic talk. Like I was just so lost. Like I don't know what I'm doing. I was just like, I'm gonna go with the win. But to me, like the easiest part for me was just really expressing how this is affecting me and my family if this law don't go into play. Like it was really just expressing my feelings. That was the easiest part for me. And just getting the word around about the campaign and how detrimental this is to our lives as single moms, as working class moms, as moms that's on public assistance trying to survive and get the means for their children, for their families, for everything. So that was the easiest part for me. And going to the places. But yeah, the only hardest thing was really trying to understand all of the political talk. But Jeff did a good, well, actually a great job at decoding that because I was definitely lost. What helped make it easier to build a successful campaign, I would say just the consistency that BCI showed, being very persistent to the nose, like, nope, you're not going to tell us no. We're going to bug you, following up with emails, following up with calls, being very supportive to the people that is in the campaign or helping run the campaign. They were very supportive. um, they helped us with transportation. They helped us with, they provided lunch for us. So I just feel as though, yeah, like those are the three things I can just think about is persistent, consistent, supportive. Yeah, those are like the main things that I think that would make it easier and be successful for future campaigns.
Yeah, just want to lift up from the chat. Sunny, I heard you mention childcare at meetings earlier. Just want to ask you, like, like that's one of the first things you mentioned when you were talking a couple minutes ago that you remember from one of the first meetings. So, like,
Yes.
how does it build the space?
Yes, childcare definitely, because like again, this is our career, and it's not, our career doesn't create stability or that security to just have babysitters or, just constantly. So they did provide that for free. And it helps a lot because like it was a lot of events that BCI provided childcare, and my children, I was able to go and my children were able to go. And they make sure everybody eat, they make sure everybody, gets there and gets back home. So yes, the supportiveness is very real. And that stands a long way because a lot of people don't have a support system in terms of their career goals. And BCI definitely have that down to a science, like how they operate. And it's a team. Everybody's on one page. It's no confusion. And everybody that's coming together with the campaign have the same morals. So that's what I believe, could continue to make a successful campaign for the future.
How many languages were the meetings?
Oh, 3.
Yeah.
Spanish, Amharic, Tigrinya, English.
Yeah. So how important was it for all of the meetings when we were just with each other and also with the council members to be in all the different languages, and so you could understand and so you could talk with other vendors who spoke other languages? Like, how important was that?
Yeah, very important. I like is different language, and we have an interpreter also. So I speak also Amharic and Tigrinya and my English, broken English. So I like that. Yeah, it's different culture, different language. I like that. Yes.
Yeah. And what do you all think? Like, if it was only in one language, way less vendors could go down and talk to the council members. So how important do you think it was for different groups of people to come together who usually can't speak directly with each other because of language
Yeah,
barriers?
so that's why they have interpreters. So the problem is they solve with interpreter. Yeah. Otherwise, we cannot speak well English. So this big problem for us.
Do either of you remember a time when we were there at the city council with the interpreters, when you got to like really speak with the city council or someone you think like you would never have had a chance to tell your story to? Do you remember a time? Do any of those times like pop out for you in your memory for when you were able to like really feel powerful or make sure that you could tell your story and be at the city council? And did you ever think you could do something like that before?
No, no, I don't think so. No, the first time.
Yes, that's the same with me. My first time, never thought I would be ever doing that. I never thought I would have a press conference. I never did. I never thought I would talk to I think it was Vincent Gray, one of his legislative directors. I never thought I would do any of that. Brianna and Nadu, it was just a lot, but I'm very thankful. I never thought I would talk to newscasts, just never. But we nailed it, and we got our points across, and I'm very proud.
Sonny, you ended up being featured in a whole DCist article about the history of Black street vendors in DC, the long history. I mean, you went from not knowing about it at all to doing that. How does that feel? And
Yeah,
Kasai was on the front page of the Washington Post.
That's
yeah,
first time.
yeah, that felt good though. Like, again, I was very proud, and then my children, they seen it, so that makes me even more proud. Like, yeah, mommy did it. Yep, and y'all could do it. So, I know they boasted about it. They were telling their teachers and stuff, because when I'll pick them up, the teachers, they'll bring it up and stuff. So that was really good, refreshing.
So narrative change always precedes policy change, right? And so I think a big piece of the early campaign was creating a public narrative that was compelling and a winning narrative, that that the vendors had a right to the commons, that the vendors had a right to the commons, and that the police were enforcing criminalizing the commons. That was like first off, and that it was like that what they were not doing was criminal. The vendors themselves led that campaign and won that campaign with a lot of our and my support early on, around building like a really compelling narrative shift. So that, I mean, that was just a drumbeat throughout, and it started in, I want to say, late 2018, early 2019, with a DCist article that really captured people's imagination about the hard lives of vendors and what it takes for vendors to survive. And that, like, the abuela of Columbia Heights, a grandmother, had been assaulted by the police for like selling pupusas to the children getting out of school, when she should instead be lifted up. It's like a community peacemaker that's being physically assaulted by the cops. So that had to happen first, like first and foremost. And there, it wasn't like we didn't have the resources to hire like professional media people. The narrative campaign came out of organizing and doing a lot of one-on-one and field work with the vendors and spending a lot of time with them. And I can't like emphasize that more. If there isn't a lot of time and energy invested in basic organizing with people, understanding them, getting to know their stories, earning their trust, like that's got to be the foundation of everything, because nothing starts, or we don't have the kind of civic engagement that we see happened here, or even a ladder of civic engagement where you see like Sonny talking about now getting engaged in a surveillance campaign with the ACLU. I was just going to say that, a year before I met Jeff, movement lawyers from American University and a legal team of legal interns really stepped in as like organizers who came to the vendors without an agenda about what the policy should look like. And then they joined me and did hundreds and hundreds of hours, in addition to like getting data through the Freedom of Information Act around how vendors were being criminalized, and which vendors were spending time like actually incarcerated for vending without a license. And then only after like hundreds of hours of listening, like a team of 3 people did then they began to start to craft a law with with some of the staff at Brianna Nadeau's office. So again, in terms of roles, it was the vendors themselves and the data, through participatory action research and the like just tons of information and data that the law rose up with support from this really progressive lawyer and legal clinic, Joe Polari, at American University. So like the advocacy came on the back end, like 1000%. And that's, I think, why you see and saw the levels of engagement that you saw. And then I think, there's just, but without there can be all of the commitment and hundreds of hours of dedication to field. There can be a 1000% commitment to access, language access for poor and working class BIPOC people to be able to engage in the legislative process. But with all of that, without the extremely powerful advocacy team and the really sharp analysis of the carceral impacts of the way that DC departments interact, there isn't a win, right? I mean, it is just impossible without a really dedicated team of advocates that are willing to hang in for several years to win a piece of abolition, because it's not easy. This was flat out a 5-year fight, and it was a really smart and dedicated advocacy crew that then leaned into those roles that helped push us over the line. But I think it was the DC council chair himself that said that, well, first of all, he wasn't even going to give the bills a hearing. But second of all, it was the council chair himself that said, I'm willing to let this process go further because over 100 vendors and some supporters, but mostly vendors, showed up to testify that they wanted access to be in compliance with the law, but they wanted also their workplace to be decriminalized. And it takes that level of civic engagement to actually win in a DC council that's still fairly moderate and a mayor that's completely against any form of abolition or anything that's pro people.
So one example of this is Kasai. You shared with me a lot about the challenges you faced at the storage depot where you would store your cart. Mm-hmm. And not talking with vendors, you look in the regulatory code, there's a line or two that references storage depots and how they need to be inspected and licensed by the Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection. But from reading that, you have no idea how vendors are impacted by storage depots actually working. And Kasai, you shared many times that, you've been exploited in different ways from these storage depots. They'll charge you different amounts of money to store your cart if you don't buy supplies from the depot. And if you buy supplies, then they'll charge you less for the storage. Right. And there's also big costs that you need to pay for a puller. Yeah. For someone to bring your cart to and from your spot every day we pay $30. Exactly. For the pulley. Because the Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection would only give, authorization to a small amount of storage depots throughout the city that are far away from where people vend. So we really, really needed to be engaged with and talking to so many vendors to learn about how the system works, so we could learn what actually needs to change. So now just to keep with this one small example of the big change is, now the new law is going to allow vendors, any vendor who prepares food from their home kitchen, they can store their cart at their home, and they can just have an area at their home inspected by DLCP, so that can be the official space where they're able to store their cart. So even little things like this just have a huge impact on people's lives and how they're able to engage in the street vending workplace. So wanted to share that example.
But for us, Jeff, always we need a depot, because the cart we cannot park in any place. Yeah, so we need to still.
Yeah, so I mean, even learning that the depot was a big issue.
Yes,
you could only learn that by working together, talking.
Yeah.
I had been co-lead on a campaign, the Excluded Worker campaign, that had won $75 million for informal economy workers, like the street vendors in the city. And one of our key policy advocacy supporters was Donnie Crawford at the DC Fiscal Policy Institute. And, I guess what I want to say is that, like, when it's like BIPOC femmes and Black femmes in DC leading the policy work with a kind of vision, it makes a difference. It really makes a difference. And Donnie made a huge difference in that campaign and then went on to work for Kenyon McDuffie. And I had been thinking, for a while, like, and then American University ended up like shutting down the program that was working with us, and Jeff and I were like on the path looking for partners because we knew you have to realize you can't do it alone, like we have a mayor that had no term limits and is completely opposed. We have a just slightly left of moderate DC council, like charitably speaking. And, we knew we couldn't do it alone. So we had to be very like intentional about how we wanted to choose our advocacy partners. And, I don't know who asked for the meeting first, but we ended up like really sitting down with DC Justice Lab and also ACLU and really planning. And when, for me, the gold star was when we had a meeting that was planned with DC Justice Lab and ACLU, and I was like, so would you all be willing to fill out the Midwest Academy organizing manual with us and like really meticulously plan out in this like really intense strategy chart, organizing chart that's like kind of like a Bible for organizers? Would y'all be willing to do this? And they were like, of course we would. It was Naike and it was Natasha from ACLU, but it was like other folks on the team too. And they like sat through and planned with us, right? And so that was a marker for me of like, okay, these are the kind of advocacy partners that understand what it's going to take to win this and that they share a theory of change with us, right? Like they share a theory of change, y'all share values. We knew we would not be at odds with each other. Like a coalition has a certain culture and a campaign has a certain culture. And when the campaign partners are at odds with their culture, their tactics and their strategies aren't going to match. But from jump, like ACLU and DC Justice Lab and the like BIPOC femmes that were like sort of like the thought leaders there, really shared our culture around how we wanted to move and our values. And I think that really worked. And then we ended up, finding other advocacy partners that followed that lead and followed the tone that was already set. And I think, yeah, Jeff, like, also we found each other. I mean, I don't know, like, it's interesting. People who are doing similar work always end up kind of like finding each other in DC. And we were like, okay, we're going to fight for this piece of abolition. We may not be able to defund the police, but at least we can kick them out of the vending zones. And there were people who were like, we'll take that as a win. Like, I think big movement change happens in patches, in little patches here and there. And there has to be like multi-year visions as well. And a willingness to be like, okay, that's not just reform. Like, just because we couldn't get the whole thing, we are going to fight for this as hard as we possibly can and create as much access as possible so that we can get one piece of what we want.
Yeah, I don't have much to add other than just to say, I think Felix is 100% right. Can't do this alone. And a huge part of this successful campaign, can't speak to campaigns in general, is we needed to bring as many people along as we can. And that means doing deep field work with vendors and talking with people and seeing like, hey, how are you being impacted by this? Do you want to do something collectively to change this? And also people in the community to support in mutual aid ways and anybody who can support in any kind of way, including advocacy partners. So all I have to add about that is just, I think we can only build at the speed of trust that we have with people. And we saw the work that DC Justice Lab is doing. Felix, I saw the work that you were doing at the start of the pandemic and was like, I need, that looks right. Like that looks like supporting working class people to control something in the city. Like I don't know what it's going to become, but I need to follow that spark that I see there. And I think it's the same. Like we organized with Natasha Napper through World War Mutual Aid, who works at the ACLU, and that's really how we made that connection with ACLU. We were aware of the workers' rights clinics that Washington Lawyers Committee used to put on before the pandemic, and trusted them in their work and reached out from there. And they introduced us to SEDEC DC. We were aware of the work that Jews United for Justice have been doing on different campaigns. So it's just, we can only notice things that other people are out in the world doing, and move with people who we think we might trust, and get to work building that trust with people.
Imagine like the basement of the Wilson building in this big room none of us even knew existed, with all these deputy mayors and like everybody all lined up. And when Jeff gets some last minute text like, "You are invited to the basement of the Wilson building." And we're like, what the heck, So we all just go down there with all of our interpreters and all the vendors and all the kids, and like everybody's helping take care of the kids. And I mean, it's dozens of people. And we just made the space ours, like claimed that space. But there's no way that like Felix and 30 vendors, like that just doesn't happen. We had been doing that at the city council. Like people were familiar with going to the city council, but like actually, like that's just so much institutional power right there, and actually carving out a space. I still remember Jeff, Marcus, and Naike lined up, and we were filing into the room, and I grabbed them and I said, "Y'all are our legal team, and you need to line up on the other side of the table from them and stare them down and take control of the conversation from the beginning, and just line up your arguments and decide how it's gonna be, because like this is it. It's like y'all are trial lawyers right now. It's time. It's time." And like they took charge of the room, and they made all the safe space for the vendors to then say things that were like, it's impossible to argue against when their children, like the parents are supporting their children to say, "I am afraid what's going to happen to my mom right in front of me if you let the cops keep doing this." And like without the like just this like formidable, like they were like a line of lawyers. Like it was like amazing. And the vendors saw it, and they saw them like just like they're taking out their swords, And I hate to do all these military things, but I mean it was so deep, it was so deep. And it's terrifying to go down into those spaces. Like that's like it's even unofficial power, is even deeper, right? And like it's terrifying to go down into those spaces. And they suddenly became this phalanx of like lawyers, like putting the city on defense, and like flipping the tables and changing the whole like the way that power was flowing in that room. And I felt like that was just such a turning point in the campaign, Jeff. I know I keep coming back to that, but like it really was a big deal, because like so all of the agencies were in the room that we had come to do battle with, like every single one of them. And there was such a sharing and a back and forth sharing of space between the vendors.
Yeah, I mean that was a wild moment. I think it was a turning point for the campaign, and I don't even remember the names of the office of the deputy mayor who we were talking to, but it was the boss of the police and the boss of the DLCP. So like now we were over the head of the directors of the agencies, and it was so powerful. Like just vendors were able to speak directly to them, and like we had to marshal all of the organizing, all the resources that we had brought together to be able to open up that space. And I think vendors talking directly to those people really, really did start to make things make more sense on the executive side. And I also just want to shout out Naike more, but like for real, I think Kasai, the first time, I think you still remember the first time you met Naike. I think we were in St. Stephen's Church, and Naike was there supporting you put together your testimony for the hearing in September of 2022.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. So Naike answered the call tons of times, came out to the street, built relationships directly with vendors. So I think, Naike is a huge part of showing this model, this example of how advocacy needs to be you know, like led by people who are impacted by laws, and everything needs to flow from where the people are at who are impacted by laws. First, base building is the key. Got to build a strong base of people who are impacted by the law, or just impacted by, you know, some kind of situation that's happening. And I also think you need to combine a lot of different pieces. You can't just tell the DC government, don't do this. You also need to tell them what you want to do instead. I think Chairman Mendelson was very clear that he wasn't going to be moved by anything we shared to just like remove the police from the workplace. He was very concerned on what comes in its place. Like if we remove a piece, like what is the comprehensive regulatory system looking like? So I think you need to combine the field work with well thought out policy proposals that are also deeply informed by the field work. And you definitely need direct action and protest, and you need the media work too. Felix did an incredible media work for the campaign. We were all over the place. DCist, Washington City Paper, Washington Informer, Washington Post, everywhere. So I think you need all those elements.
I would say, like, to add to that, like a really thorough, funded and powerful civic engagement strategy and training program. Like, we explained how the city council worked so many times. We had multiple lobby days in multiple languages. In the trainings themselves, there was not a lot written. A lot of it was like immersive popular education. A lot of it was like pictures of city council members. We taught what a whip list looks like how to get a majority of the votes by people moving around like little heads of the council members from the right to the left. And we're like, good, they're all moving to the left. And then it was like, oh, Mendelson, we've dragged him to the left now, you know, and really analyzing like how much power does somebody have versus how close are they to our agenda. We did that training multiple times in a way that lands for adult learners. And like, if you don't do that, then what happens is like highly literate, paid professional advocates end up walking around with a lot of paper and talking points, understanding how the power works, and then people who are directly impacted are walking stories, and that is all. And it is one of our deepest values and mine, and we share that with like our advocacy partners and the BCI team, and this is like part of our methodology, is that like in order to not be extractive of people's stories, we have to like really get up the power analysis as a whole group. That's the only way you build movement build, and that's the only way you get leaders who like climb up the rung of civic engagement, right? That they're like, I'm here for this campaign, like I'm here to tell my story. Then I'm here to like move the city council because I understand what it means to do that. And then like, okay, now I'm here to win this campaign. Okay, now I'm here to actually work on how the city surveils us. Like, without that kind of deep training and deep understanding and investment in that, people don't stay around for the long haul. You know, like if you just mobilize them for their stories. And we did not do that. 100% did not do that, but it takes a lot more time and a lot more intention and a lot more investment in what it takes to support a field. Then I would like say, first and foremost, if you move with access first, like then like everything begins to unfold. And so you have to decide, like, are we or are we not going to just bring the whole kit and caboodle with us, like all the interpreters, all the food, all the childcare, like all the everything, like, you know, we bring it there. Like if we cannot find a way, we make one. We'll just make a way, right? And then that requires a huge investment of like resource, people, and time, but like the return on it like keeps on happening, you know, like beyond us. I didn't know how deeply Sunny was still engaged in the surveillance like ACLU surveillance campaign. Super happy about that. we also don't hog our leaders, you know, we're not like, oh, those are our people. Like, no, like when ACLU came to us, we were like, yeah, please train people who want to participate in this. We want them to like be on a, you know, as big a stage as they want to be. And it doesn't have to be our stage, you know, like these aren't like our people. And so I think that like, that's important in not moving like you're part of the nonprofit industrial complex. It means that like we don't like leaders, and leadership is not a zero-sum game.